true honor. My heart is literally palpitating. I was going to come up here and start by saying, I don't think there's been any more important time in history than right this moment to talk about what we've been talking about the last couple of days and what you've been doing the last couple of days. To talk about health, about well-being, about psychological soundness and groundedness, and about being able to engage with the world in a way that makes the world a better place. There is no more important moment in history for that. And for this, I honor this team here. And I was saying to Nance earlier, what is being done here at George Mason, I haven't seen. I don't think it's being done anywhere else. I know it's not being done this way, so the fact that you're all here to participate in it is exciting to me, and it gives me hope. It gives me hope for us, and it gives me hope for you, and it gives me hope for our world. So today, what I would like to share with you, I'd like to bring you into my world just a little bit and talk with you about some of what I've discovered over the last few years, or maybe the last couple of decades actually, about what it takes in order for us to create resonance in ourselves, with others, in our teams, in our workplaces, for us to be resilient in the face of the onslaught of stress and pressure that is the reality of most of our lives, and what it means to be happy at work, and how we can be happy at work. And it's the end of the day, it's Friday, some of you are facing commutes, and I'm sure you're thinking about what you're doing tonight and all the rest of that. But I hope to keep your attention with maybe some good ideas, an idea that maybe will resonate with you here and there, but also to get you involved in some discussions and some activities, and to maybe try on some of this and see what you might do to create a little bit more resonance in your own life, a little bit more resilience, and a little bit more happiness at work and in life. So does that sound like a good way to go forward for the next hour or so? Yeah. All right, good. So, I don't have many slides or anything like that, but I do have a few, and mostly pictures. Some of you know, and I know that those of you who I've spoken with before know that I'm married to a wonderful man from Africa, and we visit there quite often. Well, as often as we can afford it. It's far, and it's expensive, and when you go, you need to stay a while. But we do go back. And Eddie is from a remote village in Zambia. That's where he grew up. He made his way in his 20s to the UK, where he went to college, and then went to graduate school, and by the time he was about 55, he had a doctorate, which is unbelievable, considering that he grew up with lions running between the villages near where he lived, which was true. When we went back there a couple of summers ago, we went to the village, which is very remote. It's very far away. I mean, you have to drive on dirt roads for hours to get there. And when we went there a couple of years ago, we were stunned to get to a little market crossroads about 15 miles from the village. And I took this picture, and you'll see what I see in the background, right? Right? Yes, it's a cell phone tower. And I am telling you, our village, there's nothing there. There's no money economy. There is no money economy. Start with that, right? There's no electricity. There are schools that the kids that the UN put up and the British colonials put up many, many years ago, that the kids walk very far to get them, and they generally only go to third or fourth grade. But it is a literate country, which is really, really cool. But it's just so different. It's subsistence farming, and there are cell phones in our village now. There are cell phones in our village. I mean, take on the reality of that, right? And what that means in practice is that our family can get access to medical care. They text Lusaka, the capital city. Somebody from Lusaka gets a truck or a motorbike, gets up to the village, many hours to get there, picks somebody up, brings them back to the hospital, and they live instead of dying. And it's that real. It's that real. What is also real is the kids now get on these phones. Now you got to walk the 15 miles to charge these things, right? But the kids get on them. You know they're stealing those phones, right? And the kids are getting on them, and they're texting people in Lusaka, cousins and things. They're also texting my kids in Philadelphia or in Los Angeles, and their cousins elsewhere as well. The world is really, truly changing. Much of it for the better, not all of it for the better, however. I'll stay with the positive for a second. If we can magnify out from my little personal story, the billions and billions of people who are having different experiences right this minute than they or their families did 2 years ago, or 5 years ago, or 7 years ago, and think about what that means for some of the things that we care about. Education, knowledge dissemination, democracy, freedom, people's ability to choose what they're going to do with their lives. It is changing, and that's so exciting. It's so exciting. But what is also happening is that we're living against this backdrop of change. We're living against a backdrop of massive political, economic, social change that is, quite frankly, hard to handle. I'm going to wake up every day saying, oh, woe is me, the world is changing and I can't handle it. We don't do that. We're very adaptable creatures, of course. But the reality is we are living in the midst of an era when almost every social structure we've ever known in recent history is at least crumbling around the edges, if not outright shifting and changing. And that, that's difficult. One of those structures is work, right? One of those structures is work. I've spent a lot of time wandering around talking with leaders, managers, executives over the last couple of decades, and some of that in very personal conversations, coaching conversations and the like, where you get to know each other quite well. And they tell you things that they might not, well, they don't tell their managers or their bosses because it's not safe to talk about vulnerabilities. And I started noticing a trend a few years ago when we were talking about all these pressures and all these changes and how we're evolving and how great it is and global communication and technology and all of this. I started noticing a trend that in the midst of these conversations about how much we are changing and how much the world is changing and how true it is that we are living in what we all seem to think is the greatest change in human history, there's something else that's happening too. And that is that people are starting to crumble just a little bit. Let me tell you a quick story. I was with a particular individual that I happen to admire very much. This man is, let's see, how old is he now? He's in his early 50s. He's sort of at the pinnacle, well, maybe not pinnacle, but he's sort of at a pinnacle in a career. He's doing really, really well. It's in a business environment. He's very successful. Financially and otherwise. He's had great business results. His company is ethical. It's a good company. It's one probably any of us would be proud to work with and for if we were in that business environment, right? It's it's a good thing. He's got a really lovely family and it's all sort of nice. And we were sitting down not so long ago and I asked him how he was doing. Let me call him Mark for sake of picking a name. I said, hey, how are you doing, Mark? What's going on? And we were talking, and he was telling me about some hassles at work and some hassles with his boss and things, sort of normal things. Well, then it just sort of snowballed. It was talking about, this problem with that team, and this problem with the business, and this horrible, unethical thing that was happening over here in one part of the business, and what was he going to do about that. An hour into the conversation, he looked at me and he said, Annie, I am working harder than I ever have before in my entire life. He paused, and then I swear his eyes teared up. And he said, and I don't know if it's worth it anymore. And it took my breath away. Because this is an individual, this is the kind of individual we need in our businesses. This is the kind of person we need impacting our organizations and the people who work there and the customers who they do business with. He's a great man, he's intelligent, he's ethical, he's loving, he's kind, and he's telling me I don't think it's worth it anymore. Well, I started to really perk up because I had heard this more than once in various ways over the previous year or so. And I was chalking it up to, well, we just went through a recession, well, globalization, well, technology, well. And I realized, oof, this is a theme I'm noticing, right? And then I started looking at myself. and I started thinking to myself, admitting is a better word, that I was starting to feel the same way. I love my work. And I mean, I really love my work. I feel like I make a contribution sometimes that may be meaningful to people. I'm proud of what I do. And I was starting to get to that place too, where, I was starting to think that in fact, burnout is an epidemic. Burnout is an epidemic. If I'm suffering for it, I consider myself a really resilient human being, a total optimist. And all these people, this is a problem. So optimist that I am, I started looking for solutions, right? And not just quick answers. I went back, we've been studying leadership and emotional intelligence a lot over the years, so I started looking at that. Saying, are there any answers here? Do we just need to become more self-aware? Is that it? Do we need to build better bridges and build better relationships? And the answers to those questions seem pretty intuitively to me, yes, a resounding yes. But it didn't seem to be enough, really didn't. So I thought, well, I'm sitting on all this information. We've done a whole lot of studies of organizations over the last, let's say, 7 or 8 years. We go in to study leadership practices or organizational culture in institutions as varied as higher education, to media, to large government institutions, including large governments themselves in various parts of the world, to big oil companies and everything in between, right? And I thought, let me go back to all that data and let me see if it's telling us anything. And so I did. There were a couple of really lovely young people in the company, and they pulled all these interview transcripts, whatever we had left off the computers, we put them together, thousands of interviews, mind you, thousands. Studies, and I can't say that I went back and read all those interviews again, but I was involved in most of those studies. I read a lot of them again, and I read the studies, and it became incredibly clear to me that people were screaming the answer. They were screaming the answer. People were telling us, we were asking them about leadership and maybe emotional intelligence, and we were asking them about organizational culture. And they were telling us what they needed in order to be happy at work. And they were telling us that if they weren't happy at work, which they were saying they were not, then they weren't going to do a very good job. They couldn't do a very good job. So if part of our work is to help people become more effective, not the total goal, not the only goal, but if it's one of them, we got a big problem here. And if one of my missions is to try to support people to have better lives, we've got a really big problem here. Because we're orienting in a business, goal-directed way on effectiveness and results, and we've got really unhappy people who are burned out and experiencing work and life as less than meaningful. Now, I don't think that's any way for any of us to live. I really don't. Life is too short. It's too short. And I also believe that we have the answers inside of us. I believe we have the answers inside of us, but we've got to have the courage to A, look for them, and then B, act on the insights that we derive from beginning to understand what we need in order to be effective, yes, happy, yes, and fulfilled at work and in life. So I told you I'm going to involve you in some activities, and I'm going to start now. What I would like you to do is to turn to one person at your table, and if you've got an uneven number, turn around, get brave, turn around and go to another table, find one person, and have a conversation with that other person about a time in your working life or your school life, if you happen to be in school, when you felt deeply fulfilled, when you felt happy, when you felt as if you were, finding meaning, when your relationships were just really lovely and somehow fed you and fed the other people too. When maybe you felt hopeful about what you were doing. So have a conversation about that situation. But here's the key. While you're having that conversation, try to determine what you were doing to make that situation worthy and worthwhile of humans getting engaged and having a good time working together? What were you doing to make it good? Okay, so you're going to have about 5 minutes, so go quickly, one-to-one, find one person.
I'm thinking 5
So it's all yours? startups and nonprofits.
that the nature of your conversations differed from pair to pair. You were telling different stories, and you were sharing different inner experiences, but chances are there were some similarities. Chances are, if we were able to go out and study all that you just talked about, we'd find some similarities in what we talked about. And I don't know if there are some of the same things we've been finding, but maybe there are a few that are worth mentioning. One of the things that we've found, both when it comes to happiness at work, but also when it comes to leadership effectiveness, not only at work, but in any form. People are people, and we need to consider ourselves holistically and care for ourselves holistically all the time. Mind, body, heart, and spirit. And I'll talk about each of those in a minute, but first let me just say that, believe it or not, maybe this won't be true in this audience, but believe it or not, this is a very controversial stance in some of the circles that I walk in. Business, for example, it's getting less so. You're starting to hear about people practicing mindfulness and meditation, that sort of thing. But generally speaking, for over 100 years now, we've been following practices that emerged out of so-called management science that dehumanized us in the extreme. Kim, you know this, and Kim, by the way, was one of Kim and his colleagues were some of the first people to try to push us away from some of this very destructive so-called science that had us, again, dehumanize ourselves. We walk across that threshold into the workplace or school, by the way, and we're supposed to leave everything except our intellect outside the door. Now that's just stupid. It is. We can't, and we shouldn't. Of course, our brains are like, it's important, and IQ and all of that. We've made an argument for years that you can't function in today's institutions unless you're well-educated and very smart. I really do believe that's true. And smart comes in all varieties, by the way. It's not all how we think it is if we happen to wander the Howland halls. But you really do need to be able to see patterns and seemingly unrelated data. You need to be creative. You need to put 2 and 2 together and get 5. You really do. But that's not enough. It's not anywhere near enough. We also need to be able to be physically whole. Physically whole. We need to be as healthy as we possibly can, and I don't necessarily mean free from illness, free from handicap. No, I do not mean that. I mean that we need to use whatever we have in the service of keeping ourselves resonant and engaging with others in a resonant way as well. For some of us who are lucky enough to be able to stand on 2 feet and talk like this and see one another and hear one another, we're fortunate that we have those abilities. It's true. Others have different abilities. Whatever we have, we need to be able to use, and in order to use them, we've got to take care of ourselves. I don't know if you've been following the research on sleep. Have you guys been following this? Yeah. Read the McKinsey report. A good friend of mine, Nick Van Dam, note that name down, Nick Van Dam. He is an absolutely lovely guy. He's the chief learning officer at McKinsey & Company. You'd like him. He's really great. He's a super nice guy, really grounded. He absolutely follows this model, basically, himself personally, and you wouldn't think so at McKinsey, but he's bringing it to that company as well. They've done some really interesting studies, or pulled together studies on sleep in the last few months that basically tells us, all this nonsense about people saying, well, I only need 6 hours of sleep, well, I only need 4. It's hogwash. And we've known it for a long time. The medical community has known. You start getting psychotic after about 3 days or 4 hours of sleep at night. You do. Like literally psychotic. Get into a car after 2 or 3 nights, never mind a couple of all-nighters, and you might as well just have had 4 or 5 shots of vodka, in a row. That's how dysfunctional you are physically without sleep. We know we've got to take care of ourselves. Sleep, nutrition, all those good things. I'm preaching to the choir, but it bears mentioning again. Mind, body, for sure. Heart, spirit. What do we mean by those? When you talk about emotion or heart, yes, it is the warmth of relationship that we really truly do need. There are some great studies done by Desi and Ryan, two researchers who came out of basically the 1960s and 70s, and they were shunned for years because they said in order to be motivated, one of the things we need is what they call relatedness, intimacy with others. We do. We actually do. We're humans. We're mammals. We need to be in relationship with other people, and those relationships need to be good. No question about it. Love, belonging, companionship, companionate love at work. Companionate love at work, yes, we need it. We truly do. And in order to have those kind of relationships, we need to be highly self-aware. We need to understand ourselves as well as understanding others. And then spirit. Oh gosh, there's no good word for that in the English language. I put that up and people think, oh, she means religion. Well, I don't, even though for some people that's how spirit manifests. What I mean, however, is being able to tap into your own inner wisdom, your own beliefs, your own values, that deep inner core of who you are, knowing where your line in the sand is and knowing how not to cross it, being able to tap into the courage that allows you to stand up and say no. It's interesting, as part of some of the pro bono work I do actually right there in Washington, I work with the Holocaust Museum. Who's been to the Holocaust Museum? Yay! Isn't that place amazing? It's so amazing. What we've done there, this is going to sound like an aside, but I'm making a point here. What we've done there, we've worked with them, and we've partnered to create a program for very high-level police executives in North America. We're having problems with our police in the United States, right? Right? Okay. Some very smart, intelligent, emotionally intelligent policing executives know there is an issue with the culture and et cetera, and we've partnered to develop a program to help those people who are about to take those big jobs in cities like Washington and Chicago and Philadelphia, take those big jobs, help them create a new culture inside policing. Quasi-military might not be the way to go anymore, right? Might not be the way to go anymore. So we partnered with the Holocaust Museum, and if you go and talk to the historians, and you don't even need to, you can see this in those pictures and the stories in the exhibit. There were people during the 1920s, the 1930s, and the 1940s in Nazi Germany, in the occupied territories, who, in one way or another, said no. They existed. Even officials, like there were a couple of police executives in Berlin who said, no, we're not knocking on Jewish people's doors and taking them out of their homes or taking their business, not going to do it. Did that person get shot or killed? No, he didn't. And most people who stood up didn't. Most of us don't speak up. Because we're not sure where our line in the sand is, right? And we kind of slip when there's a lot of peer pressure. But even when we do, most of us don't speak up because we're afraid. We're scared. And there are times when that is logical and real. And there are other times when we see great big monsters when none exist. Most of us are scared about ordinary human things. It's not bad, right? It's like losing our job or not getting that promotion or not getting that nice cubicle we wanted for so long, whatever it is. Most of what we're afraid of is not life and death. It really truly isn't. So knowing where our line in the sand is, knowing our values and knowing when we're not going to compromise them, and then finding the courage to say, well, you know what? I might get fired, but I have to say this. Please don't run out of here. Maybe some of you should, but not everybody always. You know what I'm saying. We really do. We really can and should speak up a little bit more often. Maybe things wouldn't be quite so miserable at work either, right? Maybe it wouldn't. So mind, body, heart, and spirit, it all matters. And when we're looking at what it takes in order for people to be happy and effective at work, start with this. Start with this. Start with considering ourselves and other human beings holistically and accepting the fact that when we walk over the threshold, we are full human beings. We are not partial human beings. We are three-dimensional, not two-dimensional. And we bring it all to work anyway. Why not just admit it and let's start using it, as opposed to trying to pretend it doesn't exist. The other thing, of course, is what we've been studying. You can read a lot about this. I won't elaborate too much, but we do need to develop some skills related to emotional intelligence. And yes, you can learn emotional intelligence. You can get better at self-awareness. You can get better at managing your emotions, managing your achievement drive, managing your outlook so that you're more optimistic as opposed to pessimistic most of the time. You can learn how to do those things. You can. It takes work, takes effort, and it takes courage, but you can. You can learn empathy. You can learn to read people more accurately. It takes practice, takes feedback, but you can do it. Relationship management, learning how to inspire others and teamwork and all those sorts of things. So mindset, using mindset, but what I really mean is the mindset that encompasses mind, body, heart, spirit, and a set of competencies or skills that allow us to engage with ourselves and other people on an emotional and an intellectual level better. Yes, we can do that. And good leaders actually inspire us through the mindset and their skills to find meaning in today and hope in the promise of tomorrow. Our workplaces are better if we all do that. And honestly, we all need to be leaders today. I think I even had a slide. I did. We really do. Every small L. You don't have to be the person with the VP title or the dean or this or that. If you do, great, right? But you don't have to be. Wherever you sit in your teams, your organizations, your groups, you have power. You have a lot of power. And I noticing I'm looking for the young people in the room. Please hear this. You have the capacity to impact your peers and us. We need you. We haven't done such a great job, let's face it. We need you, and we need all of us to come together in this endeavor. And the reality is that emotions are important in this equation. There's a whole body of science, neuroscience actually, behind the fact that we feel before we think, and our emotions impact not only ourselves, but other people. How you feel is quite literally contagious. Quite literally contagious. How you feel enables you to either take in information or shut yourself down. When we're excited and optimistic and sort of looking forward to things and enthusiastic about what we're doing, we are more creative, more adaptive, we're better, we're smarter. If you care about that, it's true. And as our emotions transfer from one person to another, literally at the speed of light, if not faster, our moods also become other people's moods. And if we happen to be powerful, whether by virtue of our role or our stance or our presence, our emotions are going to be picked up pretty quickly. So if we're scared and angry and cynical, guess what happens to the team? If we're optimistic and excited, guess what happens to the team? If you want the people around you to experience their work in a more fulfilling manner, get more done, because we do have to do stuff at work, and be happier too, then part of your responsibility is to manage your own emotions to help create a climate, the microclimate around you that allows that to happen. And it's not that hard. It just takes work. Unfortunately, however, dissonance is the default. It really, truly is. And dissonant leaders are far more common than resonant leaders. They really are. I am so tired of this. It doesn't have to be this way. But what it will take is each one of us making some small and sometimes very large changes to how we understand ourselves, how we use our intellect, our mindset, and our emotions with and for other people. If every single one of us were to make a tiny little shift, tiny little shift, we would, I believe, change our organizations fundamentally. Fundamentally. It is so easy to go with the flow and complain and gossip and join in the cynicism. It's so easy. I've done it myself. I still do sometimes, but you know, a little bit of bad joking and gossip and all that's fun once in a while. But you know, as a rule, it's harmful. It's harmful. And you know, if we were able to take a little bit more care, we wouldn't necessarily be the ones stepping on somebody, right? Because sometimes we are, even if we don't want to be. And we want to think about that. And this is, you know, maybe a little depressing, a little hard to take. We all do that to people. Small ways usually, but we all do. Knowing where our power comes from. Are we part of a majority group, for example, and we don't even recognize that we're walking around with all this power? Right? Well, you know, I would say that happens. It's happened to me, it happens to all of us. Are we walking around with a bag full of experiences that are really negative that we're just going to carry around for the rest of our lives? Yeah, well, that happens too. We have to take a look at what we're doing and where we are in this equation. And if you happen to be that guy under the shoe, this is even worse. Because once you become a victim, once you hold victimhood as the place where you live, you cease to be a leader. Big L, small l, whatever you want to call it. You cease to be a leader. Once you become a victim, you're going to have terrible difficulty influencing anybody because nobody wants to come near you. Why? It's very primal. We don't want to hang out with people who are getting stomped on because we're afraid we're going to get stomped on too. It's also, to be compassionate to us, it's also really easy to take on that mantle. Why? Go back to where I started. Backdrop of massive change in the world, it's pretty stressful, toxic, dysfunctional organizations, throw in a bad bosser and a toxic colleague, really easy to start feeling like a victim. Again, it takes a lot of self-management, self-control, self-awareness too, to not let that happen. Or when it does, take a time out, take a break, and see what we can do to change it. So I'd like to ask you, once again, to go back to whoever you were talking to a few minutes ago, and to take a slightly different tack at thinking about these ideas. This time, why don't you think about maybe a situation, a relationship at work. Let's keep it at work or school, wherever you happen to work, whether that's work or school, and whether it's, you know, pro bono work or paid work, it doesn't matter. Work in your home, doesn't matter. When you're working, think about a situation when you're working where you are challenged, you know, you're challenged relationally, you're challenged, you don't know how to get through to people maybe, you don't know how to solve a problem and you're meant to do it with other people, and talk about what is your emotional stance toward that problem. How are you holding that issue, right? How do you think about it? How do you feel about it? And then what are you doing vis-a-vis other people? And in particular, pay attention to what emotions you think you are conveying about that situation to the other people who are involved. So have another conversation with your partner.
No, I don't. I'm gonna learn from you.
You know what I mean? I mean, you almost have to.
say, for example, like a sale doesn't go through, or there isn't a meeting scheduled, or something, there's just a lot of frustration. And I think a lot of it comes from
Yeah, exactly. It's like in all of the that makes
projecting, right? Law of projecting. So it's like frustration at yourself and projects to other teams, your other members on the team. So that's why I'm trying not to project on them.
I'm probably.
I'm just trying to absorb. I'm trying to absorb as much responsibility as I can.
I think they're going to keep me another year. I got another year.
I guess what I'm trying to do is play the line between at some point, like, even if you're emotionally intelligent through the roof, like someone who's cancer is still something you can't chase. So I'm trying to figure out, like, there is creative space, but there's also needing to let people go who are circling. So that's what I'm trying to do. I'm worried about it because I think he's a really good person, and I don't think his actions are him, but it's also his actions are reflected.
talking about this for a while, I'm sure. What I would encourage you to do, at some later date, maybe this weekend or next week, with a colleague or a friend or maybe your partner at home, have both of these conversations again. Where do you, or have you found happiness at work, and where have you found meaning at work, and what have you contributed to that equation? That's one conversation. The other conversation is, well, okay, let's look at the other side. Where are you experiencing difficulty, and what are you contributing to that equation? You know, we have a lot of choices, more than we know about the degree to which we create resonance in ourselves and with people and with our teams and in our organizations, or the degree to which we create resonance. We have a lot of choices. It's so easy to point to the proverbial them and say, well, he won't let me, they won't let me, the culture of this place, right? Those things may be true. They probably are true. You're not crazy. Many of our organizations are toxic, and there are a lot of bad managers out there. There's no doubt about this. And, you know, you've got the Machiavellian colleagues too, right? It's all true. But that does not mean that you can't create a microculture around yourself, that you can't stand tall in your own values about how you treat other people, how you respect yourself and other people in that relationship. One-to-one, groups, larger systems. We really can do more than we think we can. We are not prisoners. We are not prisoners of our organizations. And sometimes we act that way. So I'd really encourage you to have those two conversations. And when you do, I'd like you to remember that part of the goal here is to avoid what we call the sacrifice syndrome. Back to my colleague who said it's not worth it anymore. This guy was burning up and burning out. He was experiencing just absolute overload, sacrifice syndrome, giving and giving and giving and giving for so long and in so many different ways in a toxic environment where he was taking some of that on, but he was starting to crumble. If you're going to return to a state of renewal, right? If you're going to return to, and my guess is most of you need to return to, not remain there. Most of us aren't there. I may be wrong with this audience. I mean, this is a special group of people who are focusing on wellness and well-being. So you're probably a lot better off than many of the people I talk to. Then again, you live and work in the same organizations, right? As some of the rest of the folks I talk with. Coming back to a state of renewal takes some work. It really does. And some of you know, Richard Boyasis and I and Fran Johnson also have been looking at various practical ways we can do this. In addition to obviously developing our self-awareness around what we're contributing to the good, what we're contributing to the bad, we've looked at three practices in particular: mindfulness, hope, and compassion. You can see it right up here. Let me talk about hope and compassion first, and come back to mindfulness in a second. The experiences of hope and compassion, they're different, of course. Hope is an orientation to the future that allows us to feel, truly feel, that future will be better than the present, than our present state. And this can be looking at our little girl smile and imagining what her life is going to be like. It can be watching our team work together and thinking about what we're creating and how that product or service is going to contribute to people. It can be all sorts of things, but it orients us toward a future that's better than today. That experience. And the experience of compassion, and by compassion in this sense, I mean a feeling of connection with other people, caring for other people, caring, another controversial world in the business environment, right? Caring for other people with a commitment to do something about the care and concern we feel for others. Those two experiences are so normal for human beings. It's where we live. Any of you who've been through a difficult time, whether it's a divorce or, God forbid, a death in the family or an illness or natural disaster, whatever, any of you who have been through those terrible times, those tragedies, right? You know that hope is what gets you through. Hope is what gets us through when we don't think we can get up the next morning and go on. right? Hope is what gets us through when we're experiencing tough times at work too, right? It really is. We are inherently optimistic creatures. It's not hard to tap into that. Likewise, compassion. I don't know if any of you have read anything by Jeremy Rifkin, but he wrote a great book a few years ago called The Empathic Civilization. It's really thick. It's really good too. His main point in that book is that we aren't inherently these vicious, warmongering creatures that we seem to be. We are inherently cooperative and empathic creatures, and I would say compassionate creatures as well. We orient toward helping each other. We really do. And it's easy to tap into that. Why would you want to tap into that? To avoid the sacrifice syndrome? Well, those two experiences, hope and compassion, there are probably others, but we focused on these two, literally change our brain chemistry. They impact our central nervous system. They essentially destabilize the stress response, and in some cases, stop the stress response, help those nasty hormones to kind of die down in our bloodstreams so that we return to homeostasis, to a grounded, calm state. It literally is neurological. Psychologically, it feels good. It feels good. And in our workplaces, why shouldn't we focus on a positive future? And why shouldn't we express our care and concern through mentoring, helping, managing for development as opposed to punishment? Why not? That's what we're there for. We're there to get things done through and with people and hopefully leave them better than we found them. Mindfulness. How many of you do practice some sort of reflection, meditation, broadly speaking, something? Oh, yeah, a lot of you. You know, the way we look at it, we've taken our, I guess, definition of mindfulness, if you could call it that, from Buddhism and from cognitive psychology, both, right? We have looked at, in particular, Tibetan Buddhism and the tenets of Buddhism. I personally am not Buddhist, but I happen to believe that there are a number of truths in that philosophy that we can all learn from. Some of them have to do with how important it is to remain calm and serene, or to seek calmness and serenity. And obviously there are practices that have grown up in that tradition over many thousands of years now. Cognitive psychology is a different take. Cognitive psychology, and Ellen Langer is my favorite theorist in this area, looks at mindfulness as the ability to open one's mind and to be mindful of self, others, and the environment. It's not that dissimilar from the Buddhist philosophy. When we are in this state, we are much more able to manage our emotions. That's true. When we are habitually seeking, at least, calmness, serenity, open-mindedness, we tend to be more adaptable, more cognitively flexible, more creative, all of those good things as well. In addition to that, it helps us to deal with stress. What we found, however, is that if you're going to live like that, then you need to learn how to live like that. It doesn't just happen when you say, I'm going to be more mindful, starting now. You have to take time. And generally speaking, that means time alone, reflecting, writing, thinking, breathing, meditating. For those of you who have some sort of a practice, that's great. For others of you, there are other ways to do this. Out for a walk in nature, get your hands in the dirt, plant something. So, literally go out and do something that helps you empty your mind, get in touch with something that's a little bit simpler, more natural. It actually helps. You do those three things and, you are going to be able to, experiencing hope and compassion more often. 5 more minutes a day, right, of meditation or practice or reflection or whatever. I'm not talking 2 hours of yoga. Before you get out of bed, don't reach for the phone. Don't reach for the phone, right? Just lie there for a few minutes and breathe and think about something hopeful, or think about somebody you care about. Don't flip it open and see who wants a piece of your hide today. It's true. It's true. All right. I won't belabor the point. Mind, body, heart, and spirit. Develop your capabilities, especially related to emotional intelligence. Practice something that allows you to reflect, focus on hope, focus on compassion, and in fact, you can transform yourself. For those of you who've been trying to become better managers and better leaders, I would also say this, however, that kind of professional transformation is simply not possible without this kind of personal transformation. It just doesn't happen. Or it's fleeting. It doesn't stick. And you do, in fact, have the right to be happy at work. You want to ask yourself, am I finding meaning? Do I see a hopeful vision of the future that is tied to my work and my workplace? You don't have to work for the most noble organization in the world. You really don't. Most of us don't. If you're lucky enough to work in higher education or healthcare where the mission's not too far away, that noble purpose is not too far away, more power to you. Most of us in the world work in institutions, organizations, small business, et cetera, that are providing a little service or growing a few things or doing something like that. Yeah? It doesn't matter. We can find meaning in our relationships. We can find meaning in attempting to make things better around us, to doing things a little bit more effectively and more efficiently. We can find meaning in simply sticking to our values. Right? We really can. And then relationships at work. That's the one thing all of us can do. And in our research anyway, friends at work matter. Friends at work matter. And we can all do that. There's nothing stopping us from having friends at work, except those outdated theories that have somehow implanted themselves in our brains, that we should leave all the emotion outside the door and not have friends at work and not care about people and all the rest of that. We've got to let it go. It's time. So yeah, you can. You can find meaning and hope. You can have friends at work. You can find a vision. And I would strongly encourage you to just think about it over the weekend, just 20 minutes. Like, how can you make your workplace happier for you, better for the other people around you, better probably for your company? And to leave you with a really important thought, I think, really important thought. I've said it once, I'll say it again. Life is too short for us to be unhappy at work. Thank you very much.